experience. You walk into a tasting room, you get a glass of wine, you swirl it a little bit, and you just ask the tasting room rep or the winemaker, you know, tell me something about the wine. And all of a sudden they unload with, grapes came in at 24 brix, 2.9 pH, half the grapes were cold soaked, the other half were whole clustered, pressed. Some were they're tank fermented, laid on their lees, went through malolactic fermentation. Let's see, aged in medium oak for 6 months, racked a couple times. Came in at 50% alcohol, 15% alcohol, made 0.5 RS, and you're about to sip, and then they're like, oh, but wait a second, it's just bottled. We might have some bottle shot. And you're like, okay, do you take a sip or you run? So obviously that's an extreme example, but with me today is Rob Cox from Paradise Springs Winery. And so a lot of times though, you hear these terms, and there's just a lot of wine lingo out there that a lot of people aren't familiar with, and Rob, I've been doing this for a number of years, and it still seems to me like you're talking a foreign language. And so what I'd like to do is go through my extreme example, and what we're going to do is we're going to have the Paradise Springs 2010 Chardonnay. Now this is the successor to the one that won the governor's cup last year. So this is their flagship wine. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about these wine terms in relation to this wine, and basically let's break it down, translate it into the plain English. And so the first term I threw out there was brix, and obviously we're not talking about the building material used for this facility. It's something completely different. So
brix is one of the different things that are used to describe the sugar content in the grape. Brix is common. I use more in terms of gravity, but brix is one that's pretty universal, whether it's brewing or in winemaking. And brix is basically, to put it in simple terms, is a percent of sugar, mainly sucrose, that's in a liquid. And the liquid that we're talking about is the grape must pre-fermentation of the wine.
So what happens if there's too much or brix or too low?
You have two options. Too high in brix, typically, the yeast, especially if you're trying to ferment a wine dry, then the yeast, most commercial wine yeast that we're using can only survive to 15 to 16% alcohol. So if you're talking at a brix of like 26 plus, then you're going to have to cut the must of the grapes with water. So especially if you want to ferment to dry, if not, the yeast are going to die off at 15.5, 16%. You're going to have some sugar left behind. And then if it's too low, the wine will be out of balance, and you can chabalize using sugar to bring the overall percent of sugar up in the must, and then start the fermentation.
So basically the brix is the concentration of sugar within the grape must. Next we have is the pH.
Yeah, pH is the other big factor that of the big three that I like to say is the brix, the pH, and the total acidity. And the pH is your scale. Most wine is going to fall between 2.9 to 3.9 in pH. Most ranges in there, depending on a white wine, typically on that lower scale between 2.9 to maybe 3.4, and then reds are going to be from 3.4 up to like 3.9. Once you get above 3.9 pH, it's pretty unsafe for the wine stability and against microorganisms.
And that's also, it's sort of like the Richter scale. It's not an absolute, but it's an order of magnitude.
It is indeed, and you can carry a higher pH on wines with other factors being considered to keep the wine in balance and all that. So the pH is just, a lot of people think it's correlated to total acidity, and they're not like completely interchangeable. So
okay, so the next I talked about was a whole cluster press.
Yeah, it's more of it's how you're processing and treating the grapes. So once you harvest from your vineyard and bring the grapes into your crush pad, one of the first decisions you make is whether to remove the berry from the actual rachis and stems of the grape, or if you want to go ahead and press those still on the stems. And that's a lot of that has to do with the particular winemaker's education, his style, the type of wine that he's making, and what he's trying to do with that type of wine. So I do a lot of whole cluster press on whites. I just think it's a little more gentle on the white wine and makes a little more. That's how the Chardonnay is done. Yes.
And so let's take a step back also. Do you know what brix of the grapes?
The brix on this were like 24.3 brix, so 24.3% sugar. and the pH in this was 3.42 at harvest on this one.
And so there's actually also, later I mentioned the percentage of alcohol, so there's sort of a relative calculation you can make on how much brix comes in.
There is, and you know, when I first started making wine almost a decade back, it was basically you take that percent of sugar, so if it's 24 and you multiply it by a cofactor of 0.56, and that will, if you ferment the wine completely dry, that will give you what your potential alcohol can be. Now, there's so much research being put over the past 10 years into commercially generated yeast that they're much more efficient in producing ethanol. So I use a factor that Davis recommends at 0.6%. So if you take that 24 times 0.6, that'll get you within a few points of your potential alcohol at dry fermentation.
So then I also, the next I mentioned was cold soaked.
Cold soak, that's mainly, you know, for red wine production, where you can choose to stem those grapes and put them into bends and keep them usually below 40 degrees to extract a deeper color, deeper tannin structure. It first was mainly used on Pinot Noir because Pinot Noir is a lighter skinned variety, but it's a common practice in a lot of different regions to cold soak to try and extract as much you can from the tannins and try to get as much color extraction.
So there's probably no reason.
No reason to cold. You can. I mean, some white wines, I know some winemakers for Viognier will just stem them if they don't want to cluster plus and maybe let a little skin contact. You know, certain varieties in white you can get a little bit of textural component or flavor component from skin contact, but it's a very short. With whites, it's usually only a few hours, but it's mainly a red wine making process.
And so most, I would say most wines are actually, the primary fermentation would be in the tank. Is that correct?
For most wines. This one, however, is Burgundian in style, so its vinification is done in the barrel. So I have done that with Viognier also at times. Mainly, most white wines, I would say that more than half are done in stainless steel fermentation and then moved into barrel if they're going to age in barrel at all. So.
And then we were talking about soaking on the lees and malolactic fermentation.
Yes. So this wine is left on the lees, and lees, you know, it's a term that basically describes once the yeast are done fermenting, the leftover cells of the yeast that they die off and they fall as a sediment, and then the very fine grape solid components that are in the wine that settle in the barrel. And for this type of Chardonnay, especially very early on in the wine's age and through its fermentation process, I will stir what the term that's called a batonnage, and stir these lees back into suspension. It can add some weight and body into the wine, and they're antioxidants, so they can absorb oxygen and keep oxygen away from wine to keep the white wine a little bit cleaner, a little bit fresher, and keep the fruit and aromatics a little bit protected in the wine. So it's a choice to do that. You know, you can take a lot of wines off their lees and start clarifying them early on, you know, this wine happens to stay in this lees for its age.
Well, nice. Well, I'm glad we used that as an example. And then it also went through partial malolactic fermentation?
Yes, this particular vintage did not go through any malolactic fermentation. This was a 2010 vintage, a very good vintage for Virginia. A lot of whites almost got too ripe, and as a grape hangs in the vine, as the sugar level of the brix increases, typically the acid level is decreasing. So to keep the wine in balance, it's a wine-making decision to put it through ML, which will through the malolactic fermentation, which will lessen the acidic feel of the wine.
So it's high of acid.
You would let it go through a malolactic fermentation if you think the acid is good in balance with the other components of the wine, being the alcohol and the tannic structure, then you can choose to not go through ML. This one did not go through a malolactic fermentation. So.
Okay, and then we could spend a whole episode talking about cooperages.
For sure.
And so, but there's different levels. There's medium, there's new, there's whether you use French oak, American oak, Eastern Europe, Hungarian oak. So what generally do you have here?
In here, it's a pretty split in this vintage between French and American oak. There are some Hungarian oak. I do choose to, we make a Norton here, and I do choose to use some Hungarian oak for Norton. And as we go on here, we'll probably lean a little more towards the French oak for the style wines that we're kind of developing here in our wine program. So, and I mean, that's one of the big decisions. There's so many decisions that have to be made with the barrel and the toasting and how deep you want it toasted, and that depends on your style as a winemaker, the type of varieties you're making, and you know how you were trained and educated to what your belief in. And I always just sum up the use of oak as it's basically my seasoning. To compare it to cooking, it's your seasoning for the wine. It kind of adds the finishing touches to fill in any gaps and really complete the balance of the wine. So.
Now, one term I didn't mention, but I wanted to. You hear a lot of the wineries is racking.
Yeah.
Well, what is racking?
Racking basically means taking wine from barrel and then moving into a tank, and that starts a clarification process, especially for red wine making. It will also introduce some oxygen in wine. Oxygen can be a good or a bad thing for wine, depending on what stage you're introducing it and what's going on with the wine itself. The barrel itself does let some oxygen in through its aging process, and it's a choice. And a particular vintage like this, I would have done more racking. And this past vintage, 2011, I've chosen not to do any racking so far. So it just depends vintage to vintage, but it's basically just a movement of wine, a cleaning up of the vessel the wine is storing it, whether it's a wine from tank to tank and back to tank, or a wine that goes from barrel to tank and then cleaned and returned.
And so this is definitely one of the areas where a winemaker, that it makes their living. You don't want to introduce too much oxygen, or that wine becomes oxidized.
Yeah.
If you don't allow any, then it could become reduced.
Yes.
Which is just a pungent smell you get the way you open a bottle. And so this is a balance that you need to.
It is, and I'm probably more of a reductive style winemaker, particularly in a delicate vintage like the 2011. The wines are a little more delicate. They can handle as much oxygen as maybe 2007, 2010, a much riper, big, bolder wine vintage that the wine has the internal components to handle more oxygen. So, but all in all, I would say my style is more on the reductive side in introducing oxygen at the right times.
So, and the last term I want to talk about is bottle shock. And there's a movie, that term people have become familiar with because of the movie, and I actually experienced it at a winery a couple times. Actually, I've been told, watch out, it's just been bottled, there might be bottle shock. And, that, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, especially with the movie and all that. But it does happen. A lot of people find it hard to believe. But as you're preparing a wine for bottling, the wine is kind of pulled together. Hopefully, you're bottling a wine once it's kind of completed and balanced and pulled together. And then when you're moving it around, whether you're filtering it or not, whether you're refining it or not, depending on what wine it is, what your style is, and what you're trying to do with the wine, and then actually physically putting it into the bottle, kind of stresses the wine out, for lack of a better term, and defragments the balance in different components of the wine, the alcohol, the tannins, the fruit, and then when you taste that wine, the wine is kind of all over your mouth from the bottle shock, or it can be very closed and not be representative of what it will after it settles down. Typically, depending on the wine, who made it, the style, it can be a month to 3 months typically until it starts pulling back together.
So a good point is after bottling is you hold it up before you
We do here. We do a minimum of 6 weeks here. We do not release a wine at least 6 weeks until after bottling. So.
All right, well there you have it. Hopefully we didn't confuse you, or hopefully we clarified a few terms for us. And and if you go to a winery and they start throwing out terms you don't know, just stop and ask them. What does that mean? That's why they're here, is to educate you. So Rob, thank you very much.
Sure.
And
cheers.
We're here at Paradise Springs in Clifton, Virginia. So we'll see you next time.